Or blast from the past.
No, it's the most Forest thing you'll ever see.
I'm over it. It's fine. How does it feel to be living my dream? I don't know. Maybe I'm just jealous. He loves the Jaffa cake.
Yeah, he loves Jaffa cake. He loves Revels, FFP Derby, and all that.
The FFP Derby, the renamed FFP Derby. Hello guys, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Sportsman Untitled. I've got two very special guests with me today. We've got Adam from the 1865 Nottingham Forest podcast. Adam, how are you getting on?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Very good. And we've got Justin Peach back for his second appearance from the Second Tier podcast. All good, Justin?
Yeah, always good.
We've got some pretty breaking news here which we can react to. Perfect timing, Adam, for you to be on, really. Nottingham Forest have been found to be in breach of the FFP rules. They could be hit with a punishment from the Premier League. Basically, we don't know what exactly is happening with this punishment right now, but it could have major implications for Forest season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. And, we've seen lots of other clubs go through it. And I think, unfortunately, with things like this, every Premier League club is made aware, every EFL club is made aware of the rules. You know what you can spend, you know what you can do. And unfortunately, if you stray out of those lines, they will be strict. It's one of them, I'm afraid.
Clubs are allowed to lose a maximum of 105 million over 3 years, rolling cycle. The Premier League have reportedly chosen May the 24th as a deadline date for any appeal, which means it will be resolved this season, any punishment that comes this way. We're recording before the official punishment has been announced, if you will. We saw with Everton a 10-point deduction. If there is a similar level of point deduction or a fine of some sort, how much will that impact Forest's kind of survival hopes?
I think it's hard to tell at the minute. We're still early days with Nuno, and the United and Newcastle result were absolutely massive for us, and we played fantastically well. Then we had the Blackpool game where it went a bit south, so it's really hard to tell. But 10 points to anyone's going to be really tough, and then you've got teams around you. But we've seen Everton; they got their deduction, and they've still got themselves out of that mess. So it's possible; it can be done.
And Justin, from your point of view, we've seen clubs come up from the Championship and try and do things in different ways. Obviously, Luton haven't spent that much. Forest went up and spent quite a lot. Is this just promoted teams trying to close the gap? How do you see it from your point of view?
I guess it is promoted teams trying to close the gap. It's obviously very difficult for teams to come up from the Championship and be competitive. I think, for us to be really critical, I think the transfer strategy at Forest has been quite scattergun for the last few years, especially under Marianakis. It's been very sort of agent-led, and there's not been a lot of value there. But you've seen teams like Aston Villa and Fulham go out and spend £100 million straight off the back of promotion, which just isn't sustainable. But then again, what is sustainable? We've seen Norwich become a yo-yo side. We've seen West Brom become a yo-yo side, and then rely heavily on the Premier League money, and now they're struggling with ownership issues and trying to generate enough revenue to not make a significant loss down in the Championship again. So, yeah, I think it is a case of clubs trying to close the gap. What is the sustainable approach? Who knows? There are obviously clubs trying to spend their TV money quite quickly, but I think it does serve as a bit of a lesson to a lot of clubs coming up. You've seen the likes of Luton, Brentford trying to adopt a different strategy. It's working to some extent, but I guess it's the price of ambition.
And Adam, when you were spending all that money, was it just a kind of hype of excitement of being in the Premier League, or was there always something in the back of your mind that thought, hang on a minute, this feels a bit dodgy?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when you get promoted off the back of a lot of loan players being, a big part of when you get promoted, and you don't bring them back to the club, I mean, that's always going to be hard because you've not got that cohesion between the team. You've not got that spine that took you up. I mean, players like Jed Spence was so important for us, and we then didn't sign him. He went to Spurs, and obviously it's not gone too well for him there. But we signed replacement players for the players that we couldn't bring back. We couldn't bring back James Garner, so we signed Oro Mangala. We couldn't bring back Jed Spence. We brought in Nico Williams. We thought we were getting a similar profile of player, and look, a lot of players have worked out. Oro Mangala's now linked to Napoli, Juventus, and we've had other players been brought in that have worked. Danilo, Tyrell Wanyi. Some aspects have worked, some haven't, and unfortunately, some of the more expensive ones haven't. And players like Emmanuel Dennis no longer at the club, out on loan in Turkey, and it's really difficult. And when you come up, you've got to find a better balance than just saying names, because a lot of it felt name value. Emmanuel Dennis has got good name value, so let's bring him in. And it maybe wasn't the right strategy, and I don't think there really was a strategy as such in place.
Just in your response.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there was a lot of name value, and I think that's been the case for a while, hasn't it, at Forest, where there's been a lot of signings like Nicholas Bentner coming in years ago. I mean,
what blast from the past?
No, it's one that's come from the depths of my mind there. But it's just some odd transfers. Some have worked out, some have been brilliant. But for example, the amount of goalkeepers Nottingham Forest have had over the last few years, it's just a bit of a strange one. But it's all about having a sound backroom team, isn't it? Having a sound strategy, having a sound recruitment team. And obviously, Adam will know a lot more than me. But speaking from a basic point of view or an overarching point of view, it's having that strategy and confidence in your transfer team to go out and pick the right players. Brighton have become experts in that. Brentford are very good at that. Luton are good at that. Other teams are good at that. It's Crystal Palace as well. So I think that's sort of the models you've got to emulate when you're coming up from the Championship, as opposed to just throwing money at it, getting yourself in a hole, and obviously going for the names.
On the pitch, as we speak, 15th in the Premier League. Forest 20 points from 20 games, 2 wins in a league in the row, as you mentioned, under new boss Nuno. What are your views on the sacking of Steve Cooper now? Are you feeling more positive about it, given Nuno's had quite a positive start?
Yeah, look, I mean, Steve Cooper, I mean, for my generation especially, I never saw Forest in the Premier League. They got relegated the year after I was born, and I since then haven't seen them, been through League One, been through the Championship, and then Steve Cooper not only comes in and gets us promoted, but he came in and made a whole city, a whole fan base believe that we can be that club that we once were, and get back in the Premier League and actually stay in the Premier League and become a stable side. So sacking him was always one of them where, especially for us, our opinion was always, we can't call for his head. If he goes, then wish him the best of luck, and I hope that he gets another job and he does the same thing, and I believe he can. But yeah, look, Nuno probably wasn't a lot of our first choices. I said a lot on our podcast. I wanted Oliver Glasner to come in from Frankfurt. I think he did a fantastic job there. Young manager, plays a good brand of football, to suit the players we had. That was my choice. And then the club wanted Premier League experience, so I went with Nuno, and so far so good. I'm not going to read too much into the Blackpool game. I mean, FA Cup games, they're for one-off, aren't they, really? I mean, they're not usually reflective of where a team's at, and so far so good. And I think the sacking of Cooper, I think timing-wise would have been better off after the Fulham game rather than waiting, because he waited because last year when Cooper went under that pressure, when we got beat 4-0 by Leicester, he went and sacked the head of recruitment rather than the manager, so somebody else got the blame for what had happened. And this year I think he was worried about the PR side of things of sacking Cooper, but got to a point where he thought, I've got to do it, I've got to pull the trigger. But maybe a weird timing. I think that's the only thing that we'd all say from the time.
On to Steve Cooper for you, Justin. Obviously there's a manager there who took Forest from the depths of the Championship and the relegation zone, I think you were at the time, all the way to the Premier League, kept them in the Premier League. His stock is still fairly high, I'd say. Where do you see his kind of next job being?
It's quite interesting. I've always weirdly linked him with the Crystal Palace job, mainly because I think he was linked with the job or was interviewed for the job after he left Swansea, and for whatever reason didn't get it then. I think it seems a natural step for him to take a job in the Premier League. I think Forest is a really tricky job because you've got a volatile owner, you've got an incredibly huge squad that the running joke for years was, can they fit in the training ground, sort of thing. So you've got a big squad there that you've got to manage. Whereas if you go to a team like Crystal Palace, Roy Hodgson's, I mean, if he lasts a season at Crystal Palace is an interesting debate to have in itself, because he's getting frustrated with fans are getting frustrated with him. So I think with Steve Cooper, you get a young, gifted coach who's great with working with young players. And I don't think he's been able to really do what he's good at Forest, because he's had to have this high turnover of players and his ability to refine young players. You just look at Jed Spence, for example, with his standout season was at Forest, and now he's sort of flatlined in his career a little bit. So I think if he goes to somewhere like Crystal Palace, a club where their ambitions aren't particularly high, or not, probably the wrong phrase, expectations aren't particularly high, I think he can go in, develop the young players there and turn them into a side who are probably going to compete for mid-table to top off.
And on to the Premier League relegation battle. We're not sure if there's going to be a points deduction for Forest yet. From your point of view, which three teams do you feel are going down right now, and are Forest one of those?
I think for us, without the points deduction, I think it will be the three promoted teams. I've been really impressed with Luton since they've come up. I don't think anyone expected them to come into the league and be as good as they've been. There's a lot of jokes that they'd break Derby's record, and that they quickly dismiss them jokes by actually being a viable Premier League team. So I'd like to see them not go down. I think if Brentford lose Ivan Toney, I think that they might struggle. I mean, they're below us at time of recording, and I think if they've gone a bit under the radar of how poor it's been this season for them, and a lot of people have just said, well, it's Ivan Toney, it's you've lost your main striker, but so have we. I know it's not maybe exactly the same, but Taiwo Awoniyi's been injured for a decent part of the season. So, but yeah, I think it were the 3 promoted teams, unfortunately. But I would much rather see Luton stay up and maybe a Brentford go down. And we've had a bit of banter over the years with Brentford fans since we come up, so it's been good fun. But yeah.
Do you trust Nuno in this kind of relegation battle? Obviously, last year you had Steve Cooper, who did have experience of winning that relegation battle. He kept you up. Nuno's kind of not had that similar experience. So are you comfortable with him in charge of this relegation threatened team?
Yeah, I think so. I think the ownership viewed him as the sort of manager that, okay, we might not finish 10th, 11th, but I don't think he'd take us down. I think that's the way that the fan base sees him as well. He's a capable manager. I think that people maybe have lost sight of that. And when he was appointed, the fan base was very mixed on it. But it would be hard for us to compare his job at Tottenham to his job at Wolves. I mean, Wolves is more comparable to Forest in that situation they were in, guided them to 2 7th place finishes in a row, and the long term aspect is that he can do that with us. Obviously not this season, but the seasons going forward. So I do think we'll be safe. If you get 12 points deduction, no, 10 points deduction, who knows? It's harder then. It's how you react, isn't it?
And Justin, if it does end up being Burnley, Luton, and Sheffield United end up going down, do you think all 3 can come back up straight next season, or do you think it'll be a bit tougher?
I think it'll probably be more competitive. I mean, this season in the Championship, it's quite hard to evaluate because you've got 3 of the relegated sides in the top 4 at the moment, but they are particularly gifted sides. Leicester, the argument is that they were too good to go down with the quality of players that they've got. Similarly with Leeds. And then you've got Southampton in the mix as well, who again have got a lot of good young players. So I think using that as an example is quite difficult, but it will certainly be more competitive. I'd struggle to see Sheffield United doing the same thing, mainly because they've still got this not hangover, but the ownership situation is hanging over them, where the owner clearly wants to sell the club. He's not found a viable buyer yet. And they're probably going to have the same issue that they had this summer, or summer just gone, where they recruited late, and it was difficult to get players through the door. It was difficult to get new contracts out. And I say that ownership, the uncertainty with the owners, going to play a big part in that. So again, it's quite difficult to see what happens with them. I think Luton are in a good place to go back up if they do go down, because it's Luton Town. Like, they have such a good ability to replace their players. Rob Edwards is such a good, talented young manager with a lot of compassion and empathy as well, which is a very difficult thing to get in a manager. I think that goes a long way. And then Burnley, if Vincent Kompany stays, I'd be quite confident in them coming back up, because their style of play when they went up was incredible, which is whether or not their young players that they have recruited this season will be too scarred from a weekly batterings that they have been given so far. So it'll be more competitive, but I'd be very confident in saying they will, because probability tells you that if you come down, you're more likely to go back up because you've got more money than everybody else. Simple as that.
They'll probably be involved in the playoff race at the minimum, you'd think. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Championship now. Adam, from your point of view, kind of from a Premier League point of view, do you think this is the highest quality Championship we've seen in the last decade? Obviously, Forest were in the league for a certain amount of time in that period.
Yeah, I think I would definitely say it could be. I mean, look, Leicester, I would argue, I mean, some Leicester fans maybe argue that the 3 teams that went up, maybe Leicester beat them on the day, in the Premier League teams now. So
going to beat Coventry this weekend.
Yeah,
I'll say to that.
Yeah, look, I mean, you've got your ex-Premier League teams, your Leicester, Southampton, Leeds, but then you've got teams like Coventry, you've got teams like Sunderland, you've got teams that are competitive. I mean, Ipswich have probably been better than anyone thought they would be this year. I think most people probably had the mid-table, and they've been well and above that. So yeah, there's a lot of quality teams and there's a lot of quality players, and it's, for me, probably still the best league in the world for entertainment value. The Championship always has been, with the playoffs and the lottery that it is. It's the ultimate prize of being promoted. It's fantastic to watch, even it's nicer to watch as a neutral, to be honest. I mean, to not be involved in that,
win more games.
Yeah, I mean, they win more games in the Championship, but I think it's one of them. It's a great league, and I think that this season we could have some of the most stacked playoffs, if you like, maybe since the playoffs began, really.
It's a scary prospect. You touched on Ipswich there. They just got over the line against Sunderland this weekend to end a little mini bad run of form. Justin, how do we think Ipswich's season ends? Do they hold on to a top 2 spot, or is it a top 4 finish, you think?
To be honest, I think certainly when last came on, I do struggle to see them holding on to the top 2. I think it's mainly down to their injury problems that they've got now. George Hurst is going to be out until roughly around April or towards the end of the season, and that's a huge blow. Whilst he's not as prolific as other strikers in the league, he knits together that attack really, really nicely. So I think Kieran McKenna, as we've seen over the last few games, he's had to almost shut up shop a little bit, sacrifice the attack and tighten things up at the back, and it has helped. They have been getting draws, and they were largely the better side against Sunderland. So if they can tighten up, then sure, they've got a great chance of sustaining their form and finishing in the top 2, but they need to bring in probably 2 or 3 players to be able to do that.
They seem like a club who will do that in January. Yeah. They've already made a couple of decent signings, and it feels like they are kind of pushing more of their chips on the table as the season progresses. I think January could be pretty big for Ipswich.
Well, yeah, they've been linked with a couple of strikers as well who fit a similar profile to George Hurst. It's very rare that you get a club who sort of openly chase players, but it's clear that their ambitions are to keep going for the top 2. And it's good to see, it's refreshing to see, because the fact that they've been able to keep up with the likes of Leicester, Southampton and Leeds, because Leicester have had a record-breaking start in the Championship, so too have Ipswich, and Southampton in other years would be top of the table with their points, and so too would Leeds would be in the automatics as well. So for Ipswich, their budget to keep up with them teams is remarkable, and it pays dividends to the work the club has done over the last year to get them in that position. But to be able to sustain that form, they've got to compete with some heavyweights, and it's that pressure that, will it tell? That's the key thing. But Kieran McKenna is a great coach, and he's shown that over the last few weeks that he can tweak things to balance things out.
And Southampton, one of those big guns chasing them down after 4 straight defeats, which feels like a lifetime ago now. They're now on an unbeaten league run of 20 matches. I think that's a record for them. I don't know if it's been spoken about enough just how impressive they've been in the last kind of two months, really. What's Russell Martin getting right now that he wasn't earlier in the season?
Well, it's quite incredible. I mean, they've been unbeaten every month in the Championship other than September, even in August, when they weren't playing particularly well. They were still quite open. They were still getting done by teams, but they weren't being punished as often as they were in September. But essentially, things have been tweaked. They are a lot more clinical in the final third. They take their chances. They were creating a lot of opportunities without being overly decisive, especially in the early months of the season. But now they're taking those chances and those opportunities that come by them. And as well, they were so easy to play through the middle. They were easy to counter-attack, but they've got a settled spine now, which I think has helped. Jack Stevens is back from injury, which again is hugely helpful, because he's a great leader at the club, and he's really stepped up. But again, just solidifying that midfield and making sure it's compact and not easy to play through has really helped them. And I think just the character of the side for them to bounce back, because their defeats were damaging. Heavy defeat against Sunderland, heavy defeat against Leicester. They looked like they were going to concede goals left, right and centre, but it's not been the case, and they've been fantastic since the earlier stages of the season. And for them to be in the position they are now is remarkable, because an unbeaten run in Championship is a very hard thing to do.
And how do you see the top 2 ending in the Championship this season? Do you think Leicester are probably there, aren't they? And who gets second for you then?
Yeah, I mean, I wish Leicester weren't there. Ideally, it is what it is, isn't it, really? I'd love it to be Ipswich. Like the story of coming up from League One, and they've been fantastic this season. They've defied all expectations of them, and I think the difficult maybe with Ipswich is that these teams like Southampton and Leeds, and are they going to be able to spend a little bit of money in January? They've probably got the parachute payments, that sort of thing. Maybe they sort of can spend a bit more in January. Maybe they bring in a few faces that take them on a run. It's one of them leagues. It's a run league, isn't it? If I went on a limb, I'd probably say I think it'd be Leicester and Leeds. I just think that Leeds are a good side, and I think some games they just really let themselves down and they chuck games away. But I just think that they're going to have too much in the end, and I think they will spend in January. But I'd love it to be Ipswich, and if we stay up, I mean, Portman will only be a great away day next year. But we'll have to see.
And there's so many playoff chasers, and West Brom commentary in there at the moment, but Hull, Sunderland, I mean, the list goes all the way on. Watford even putting themselves in the mix this weekend. you've got the best experience of chasing down the playoffs, finishing in the playoffs, and then winning the playoffs. What was that season like for you in the Championship under Steve Cooper?
I mean, it was comfortably, by far and away the best season of my lifetime. And, the start of the season under Chris Hughton, I think a lot of Forest fans were really unsure going into that season of Hughton even keeping his job from the previous season. He came in, didn't really do an awful lot. And then we went to Coventry away, first game of the season, and chucked that away, and a game that we could have won. And it was just one of those games where you walk out the ground and you think, I don't think this is going to work for us this season. And when he got sacked, Steve Cooper came in. I was a massive advocate for Steve Cooper. A lot of Forest fans would have preferred, Chris Wilder, different style completely, and successful manager. But I think Steve Cooper's just got that potential to be an elite manager one day. And yeah, it was an amazing season. We were playing some brilliant football. We went had some big away wins, which were hard to come by over the Championship time in Forest. So it was amazing, and we were quite unlucky in the end to miss out on the automatic spots. Obviously, we had Bournemouth away, second to last game of the season, which was essentially win this game, and you got to get a result at Hull or better their result, and you get promoted automatically, and that's maybe what we wanted. The playoffs are lottery, you don't know how it's going to go, and all that sort of stuff. But I look back on it now, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And it really is the best way to get promoted. I mean, the Sheffield United game was the most Forest thing you'll ever see.
That was an incredible semi-final.
You go away to Bramall Lane, get the result, give away a goal in the last minute that you don't need to give away, and then let them come to your place and boss the game and take it all the way to penalties when Bryce Samba made himself an absolute hero in the city of Nottingham forever, and we haven't replaced him since, really. In my opinion, I think it's one of them. But the playoff final was such a special day. I don't really want to talk about the playoff final. I know it's a difficult one for you.
I'm over it. It's fine. Talking of that, though, Troy Deeney, his comments on Fantasy Dabo this week, disgraceful. Anyway, continue.
No, but the day was incredible. It wasn't the best playoff final of all time for the neutral, but that feeling when we got promoted, I went with my dad, so I go with, it's a special kind of relationship when you go to football with your family and that sort of thing, and just turn around, both burst into tears, give them a big hug, all that. It was probably one of the most special days of my life, and you look back on that and you'll always look back on it, no matter what happens in the future after that day. You did it, you got there, and the fact that we were able to stay there last season was just, it's been a bit of a magical time.
How does it feel to be living my dream?
I was going to say, it leaves a bit of taste in my mouth, because last time Derby won a playoff final, we set a record for lowest points in the Premier League. So,
you had that day.
We had that day, but unfortunately, we've had two pretty bitter ones since. So, best left there, I think.
Fans of EFL clubs up and down the pyramid kind of dream of the Championship playoff final and winning it, and you've had that moment. But they'll also want to know what it's like supporting a Premier League team in 2024 with VAR and all of that. Do the wins mean more in the Premier League? How much do you miss the EFL? Just what's it like supporting Forest in 24 in the Premier League?
I certainly do miss the EFL. I miss the 46 games a season. I miss the midweek under the lights games, because we don't get many of them in the Premier League. I do miss the 10,000 seater stadiums, other than obviously like your Bournemouths and your Lutons, but like in general, there was the away games maybe a bit better, and the fan base has changed a lot. You get promoted, and getting to away games is harder. We've got 5,000 away members, and every Premier League game, maximum really, you're getting 3,000 tickets. So, unfortunately, nearly 50% of your away members don't get to go to away games, and that's tough. And it's, but for all of the negatives, the positives just simply do outweigh it. I mean, games last season, like, beating Liverpool at home, beating Arsenal at home, like getting that point against, the best team in the world, one of the best teams of all time, the treble winning Man City. It's an amazing feeling, and it's something that you wish you could bottle up. Like the Brighton game, the Southampton games towards the back end of last season, those games that laid the foundations for us staying in the Premier League, and Danilo being amazing and Tyrell Awoniyi being just unplayable, and those moments. I mean, it's just, they're so special, and it's really hard to put into words how much they mean, and you do value every win more, because when you're in the Premier League, when you're fighting relegation, you don't know when the next win's going to come. We had that record last season where we won one game away from home, and stayed up, and it's miraculous, really, isn't it? I mean, going on the road and only winning one game, and that Southampton game was amazing because we went and we won away, and the City Ground was a fortress last season, and it's one of those. I mean, we could write a book on how special that whole time was and how amazing the Premier League was last season, and long may it continue. The atmosphere is different with Nuno, but I do believe it's still as special as it was last year.
I think it speaks to a romance of the EFL as well, because you experiencing all of that. You go into these away days, you go into the grounds where, I mean, Luton's a bad example, but I've been to Griffin Park, Brentford's old ground, where it's uncomfortable. It's not very nice. It's getting to the toilets is a mission, and you don't get that in the Premier League, not very often. So it does speak of a romance in the EFL where you don't get anywhere else. And obviously, I think the Premier League, if I have to be really critical, has probably become more of a product because it's so focused on those big sides that you lose meaning of what a win is for the sides that are fighting relegation, because they don't come often enough, or as often as people would like. Because as I say, you're down there, you're fighting relegation. So when you do pick up 3 points at home to Man United, it feels incredible. It's an incredible feeling you can't take away from that support, and that will give young fans memories for the rest of their lives, because it's the time that you beat Man United, for example. So yeah, I think the EFL's got the romance to it, whereas the Premier League's got those moments that you just can't take away from the clubs that are competing at the bottom.
I struggle with it a bit, coming from League Two and climbing the EFL. The wins in League Two meant as much as they do now, but the wins in the Championship now feel like there's a full stadium. The club's definitely going in the right direction. This is Coventry, by the way. We're on fire. It's incredible. But I struggle with what it would be like in the Premier League. I don't want to watch us get 3 touches of the ball against Man City. I don't want to watch us get goals ruled out by VAR. I'm kind of aware that this might be as good as it gets as a fan going to games and all of that sort of thing. But I'm also aware that you want to play the big teams and you want to beat the big teams. But then I look at a club, like you mentioned before, like Crystal Palace. I'm not that keen on finishing 14th in the Premier League every season. Yeah,
I think that's it. It's that ability. Well, it's not the ability, but it's the trade-off of you become a Premier League team, you open yourself up to money, but you can become quite apathetic towards football because you're just competing to be mid-table. You're competing not to go down. And where's the fun in that as a supporter? There's quite a lot of Crystal Palace fans. It's a good example actually, Crystal Palace, because a lot of fans are being sort of turned away. It's the same with West Ham, although they've turned a corner now and they are competing for Europe. But that gap between being a lower mid-table side in the Premier League to competing for Europe is so vast. It's almost like going from the Championship to the Premier League again. So it is. I imagine it is a different. I mean, as a Derby fan, I've not experienced it very often enough, but I do understand it as a football fan. I can imagine it being quite difficult, that transition to winning games to
it's
not
also
winning
having
games.
Something to play for every season with the playoffs, like you mentioned. If you're 14th in the Championship or League One with 15 games left, you've still got a chance. You've still got a chance going up. If you're 14th in the Premier League, I don't know. Maybe I'm just jealous. Maybe I'm just babbling. I'm not sure, but I think there is something in that.
Yeah, look, I think because when Forest won the Championship, I mean, I had a very similar mindset, and it's you don't want to be that mid-table club that just middles every year and doesn't really strive for anything. I think there's been a few things that have been added to the Premier League that have helped that. I think the Europa Conference League has definitely reignited some clubs' interest to carry on for the whole season because you've got Europe to play for, and people laugh at that competition.
It's true, yeah.
If you ask a West Ham fan what's the happiest moment of their lifetime, they're going to say winning that final. So, there are things to strive for as a club that is in mid-table, and it doesn't take away from the big wins, and the big wins against your big sides are still an unexplainable feeling. And when we were in the Championship and when we were fighting for automatic promotion, everyone felt special because it was like a step on the ladder to, we're nearly there, just get it over the line. And that Bournemouth game, second to last game, and that's a get it over the line game, and they're massive, but it's a different feeling. Those games to your Man United at home are different because you're going into that game thinking, look, we probably won't win this game. We're not expected to win this game. So I hate the term free hit, and I don't think that they really exist. You're playing a team that's in the same league as you. You can't look at them like a cup final. You've got to look at them as a worthy adversary, if you like. They are a team that's coming to you in the same league at your home ground, especially if it's at home, and you've got to think, well, we can get something off them. And I felt last season every single team that came to the City Ground, the coaching staff, the players, the fans, we said we can get something off you. And even the teams that we didn't manage to get anything off last season, like your Newcastle's, Man United, we've beat both of them this season. And it kind of then makes you think, you know what, maybe we can do something in this league. Maybe we can solidify in this league. Maybe we, in a couple of years' time, we might be going to the Latvian champions away in the preliminary stage of the Conference League, and that would mean everything to me as a fan. And I think the big clubs and the big six fans maybe sort of laugh at that, and they laughed at that competition a bit. And I would say that if you're a fan of a team that finishes mid-table or where Forest are now, that could be your pinnacle, and that's what you strive for.
I think that's a good point. I also think there's a lot of mid-table strugglers in League One, in the Championship. I mean, Birmingham have finished between 17th and 20th for the last 400 years, I think, in the Championship. I know they've got some ambition now, but you do get those sort of teams lower down the EFL as well. Talking of Tony Mowbray, in at Birmingham, we've had a few managerial changes, and some in the bottom half of the table, Justin, I think are quite interesting. Stephen Schumacher from Plymouth to Stoke now, and Luke Williams coming in at Swansea from Notts County. 3 seemingly good appointments, I think, from an outside point of view. Which of those do you think will be the most successful this season in the short term?
Well, I'm looking at Tony Mowbray, and I'm thinking, as far as managers go in the Championship, he's probably one of the best and probably one of the most underrated as well. I mean, he's a great guy. I mean, he was complimenting how good the food was at the ground the other week.
He loves the Jaffa cake.
Yeah, he loves Jaffa cake. He loves Revels. The man is just obsessed with food. I mean, it's my kind of manager, so it's easy to get on board with. But in terms of leaving the club in a better place than when they found it, Tony Mowbray is probably one of the best. You look at the work they did at Sunderland over the last 18 months, it's been incredible. The work they did at Blackburn as well, I think it's gone under the radar because we're seeing Yondal Thomason struggle now. And obviously the amount of value that he created in terms of player assets, it goes unspoken, but he's done a really good job of improving that aspect. But yeah, I think Tony Mowbray is probably one of the managers who are going to get a lot more, especially at Birmingham side. They are a team that shouldn't be in the position that they're in. They're in that position because of poor decision making at the top of the club, and they've done a really good job in getting a good manager. I do like the Stephen Schumacher appointment. What he's done at Stoke so far, I think he's solidified them. They've got more control in games. They've never had that under Alex Neil, and they're not conceding chances left, right, and centre. He just needs to tap into the attacking quality, which, judging by how good Plymouth were going forwards, even this season in the Championship, I think that we can expect that to happen too.
And talking of Plymouth, we're going to have a bit of a relegation talk now. Do you think Plymouth will be all right, Justin?
It's such a difficult one. I'm torn between it because I love them as a football club, because I think just like Luton, they're on the right trajectory to go to the very top. I do believe that they've got a good owner, they've got a sensible owner, a sensible strategy, a recruitment strategy, and they sign good young players. But they've gone through what I would say is a pretty traumatic process over the last few weeks. To lose your manager who guided you into the Championship, who is defying expectations on one of the lowest budgets in the league, is a very difficult thing to come back from. Not only that, but they've lost Finn Azaz, who's gone to Middlesbrough. He's been one of the best creators in the division. So you take that out of the team. I know they've still got good technical players there, but it's a big loss. And then you've got to factor in that Luke Cundle's left as well on loan, and Kane Kessler-Hayden has also gone back to Aston Villa on loan. They've lost 2 loan players there who have played a big part in their system and success so far this season. Couple that with them conceding a lot of goals and having the second worst away record in the division, new manager, there's a lot of question marks. And being pragmatic, I would say that they might face a relegation battle in the second half of the season. I don't want that to be the case because they've been a breath of fresh air, but a lot of changes in the last few weeks can lead to that.
One manager who was receiving quite rave reviews last season was John Dole Thomason at Blackburn Rovers. Things seem to have turned sour slightly there. They keep losing games. They've lost Lewis Travis to Ipswich, which was a bit of a strange loan move. What do you think of Blackburn? Do you think they're in trouble? Do you think they'll be able to hold on? They're obviously a massive club in the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, they sit about 10 points above relegation zone, about 8 points off. Playoffs just
sliding, I think.
Yeah, I think when you go for a bad run, I think it's really, the Championship's such a strange league because, like you say, I mean, you might have 10, 15 games left, and you could theoretically get relegated or you could get promoted. It just depends what sort of run you go on. So it's always difficult, and we've been there before. Championship managers, it's always a strange one because managers that can flourish and do well, then go to other clubs and struggle. Like obviously you talked about Alex Neil at Stoke. I mean, he has done good jobs elsewhere. So it's really hard to gauge how good a manager is. I don't think Blackburn will get dragged into it. I don't think they'll consider a manager change either. There's a lot going on behind the scenes at Blackburn at the minute, and
I'm not sure they can afford to change a manager at this point in time.
Affordability of sacking a manager, people don't really consider it. It's a big factor in that. So I think they'll stick with the same manager. I don't think. I mean, 10 points clear. I mean, I know in theory it's 4 games, but it's not really, is it? Because that it has to be a 4 game swing. The teams below you've got to start winning as well. And I just think that there's too much of a gap. There's too many teams. There's 3 teams worse than them easily. I can't see them getting dragged into it, to be honest.
It comes down to that. There are worse teams than Blackburn in the division. Whether or not they get pulled into, where they start looking over their shoulder nervously is another question. But I think the key word there is they are in a bit of a slide. They are in a bit of a free fall. They're conceding a lot of goals. But one thing that we never really consider in these scenarios is the situation around the club. Obviously, there are certain cash flow problems at the club. They probably might not be able to recruit as extensively as they want to. And they've got a lot of, it's one of the youngest squads in the division. I think it's the second youngest squad in the division. They've got a lot of injuries as well. So there's a lot there for Thomason to contend with, which might sort of suggest why they are conceding goals and losing games.
The manager who's led a bit of a turnaround, unexpectedly from my eyes, Danny Roll at Sheffield Wednesday. They're obviously well beaten by Southampton this weekend, 4-0. Can they do it? Can they stay up? Danny Roll's been incredibly impressive so far.
Incredibly impressive. I think from the get-go he's impressed me. Like, before even a game got started, the way he was speaking in the media was just chalk and cheese to Isco Munoz. I mean, talk about a manager being out of his depth, Munoz was, but Roll's dealing with again another volatile owner in Chansiri, and he's thriving. He's doing such a good job. They are a team that wants to play on the front foot. They want to press. They don't want to sit on the edge of their box, and I think that's good to see. It's going to cause problems like a 4-0 defeat away at Southampton. It's not a huge issue because not many teams are going to go to St Mary's and get a result. But what they have done is they've turned their form around. They've gone from being one of the worst teams you could possibly have in the Championship, potentially setting a points record of the lowest points to get themselves out of trouble. And yeah, you've got to credit Danny Rowe. He's obviously bringing in 3 youngsters as well. Bailey Kadamata has been fantastic since he's come in. A couple of more signings, and I would expect them to get out of the bottom 3 because Danny Rowe's a talented manager. They've got an experienced squad. Put some legs in there, and I think they've got a great chance.
I think if we consider that it might be too much of an ask for Rotherham and QPR at this point of time, I'd rather be in the Sheffield Wednesday camp than the Huddersfield camp at the moment. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Huddersfield have got a big transition to do over the January transfer. They've got to recruit quite extensively because their squad is very, very poor. We've seen a couple of signings come in already. Good. They need to fit in. There needs to be a lot to do there. But I think Wednesday are probably in a better position because they're going from expectations being really low to competing again. But the likes of Rotherham, they look down. It's very hard to see that. They don't create anything. It's simple as that. You look at their game by game, they just do not create chances. That's not a very good formula to getting yourself out of trouble. And QPR don't score a lot, concede some poor goals as well. So again, the formula there isn't great. Although Cifuentes, I do like what he's trying to do, but damage might already be done by the previous manager.
Right, we're going to end this podcast with a few big questions, which I'd like you to debate between yourselves. I might get involved if the takes my fancy. Right, the first one is, which current Championship manager do you think has the best chance of being a success in the Premier League? Adam, do you want to start, or Justin, do you want to jump in? I think the obvious answer would be Kieran McKenna.
Yeah, I'll throw Kieran McKenna in there, but to be a little bit different, I'd throw Mark Robinson.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
he's not good enough. He's useless.
I know he's just signed a new deal in the summer, but if I was a Premier League club, I'd be looking at it. Especially, just his ability to change things. Coventry were very poor. He's changed it to a 4-2-3-1. They're now competing. Again and looking like a playoff side. His ability to mix things up, his ability to improve youngsters. I mean, look at Victor Gyökeres this season at Sporting Lisbon. He's one of the highest prospects in Europe, which is incredible. So I think turned out to be an absolute steal at 20 odd million or whatever Lisbon paid for him. So yeah, I've got to throw Mark Robbins in. It's quite hard to.
There's something about him which makes him unfashionable to Premier League teams. And I don't know if it's his age. I think he's getting on to 60 now. I don't know if it's the fact he's British. I don't know if it's the fact that he's not succeeded anywhere but Coventry. But I feel like Premier League clubs they're never going to appoint someone like Mark Robins in a relegation battle. And if you're in the top 12, you're not going to go near him either. And I don't know why that is.
It depends what club. I mean, like some clubs go on name value, some clubs go on importing managers that really shouldn't be back in management, but they've done it before, which is it's not always the right way to appoint managers. It just depends on the club. I mean, you're looking at a few teams that were just appointed, like Crystal Palace done with Roy Hodgson. I mean, you speak to a lot of Palace fans, they'll probably thank him for what he's done, but probably time to bring in a new manager. I think Steve Cooper's the right choice for Palace, in fairness, but yeah, it's all club dependent on that. The problem is with the Premier League is that they view their club as almost like a bit of a stock market. They say, like, we bring in an unknown quantity to take over our operation, and it's an operation type thing. We're taking too much of a risk, and we're not willing to do that. And it's exactly what we did with our appointment. We didn't take a risk. We brought in a manager that's done it before in the Premier League, and a lot of teams would rather do that, unless you maybe Brighton, who just seems to get everything right.
Yeah, and other Championship managers to consider. I'll be interested to see how Enzo Maresca gets on with Leicester in the Premier League next season. I think for all his quality and how good the squad's been, it's going to be a big ask in the Premier League. And I was concerned by how they played with 10 men against Coventry in terms of not attacking. He took off Mavadidi. There were a lot of errors there. Daniel Farke at Leeds is another good example. He's tried twice with Norwich and failed quite spectacularly. Do you think it might be a case of a different club for him in the Premier League might work?
Yeah, because I think the thing is with Norwich is that when they got promoted, a couple of times they spent a little bit of money, but maybe they spent it on younger players. Like when they came up and spent 30 million on Josh Sargent. You know, he's a good player, don't get me wrong, but like they spread the money differently. Every season they came up, they just expected Timo Pukki to keep them up and score 15, 20 goals, which I mean he can do, don't get me wrong, but like their model was essentially we're happy to come up and go down. The parachute payments financially, it's actually quite rewarding to get promoted and relegated quite a bit. You get a lot of money from doing that, so their model was different. Whereas Leeds want to establish themselves as a Premier League club, they want to be getting back to the big time and stay there this time. Obviously, they had Marcelo Bielsa last time, who, if you're looking back, thinking maybe that was an appointment where he's probably a massive manager for a Championship job. Yeah, and he was unbelievable, and he got that Leeds team playing great. But because I've backed Leeds to go up, and I think they'll go up automatically, Daniel Farke's an obvious option.
What I'll throw into that is, do you think Farke, in Leeds' eyes, is the man for the Premier League seasons, 2-3 years in the Premier League, or is he just the man to get them there?
It's an interesting conundrum. I feel that he might be a manager who gets 6 games in the Premier League, see where they're at, and they'll probably turn elsewhere. I mean, they've been good this season, but they've not kept up to speed with the likes of Leicester and Ipswich, which has been a big thing for me. I think they've got the quality to do it, just haven't. And Farke's got obvious problems that he's not worked out yet at Leeds, i.e. playing against a low block. He's got pacey players, and they're finding it difficult to get him behind defences. So that's something that he needs to work out. And halfway through the season, not quite done it yet. Obviously, he had to spell it. Was it Borussia Mönchengladbach in Germany? And again, didn't really do as well as he needed to do there. So three top flight seasons and 3 duds really. It's quite hard to see how he goes again.
And let's imagine we're in room 101, or we've got a chance to put something from football into room 101. So your biggest hatred, or one thing you could get rid of and banish. They give you a few seconds to have a little bit of a think. What would it be for you, Adam, do you think, if you could pick one thing? One thing that's annoyed you in the Premier League, maybe?
VAR, yeah. I mean, it is the easy one. Yeah. And not for the reasons that maybe people would think. It's the way it's used in the Champions League, we see it, and it's used better. Like we've got the AI type technology. They show you the replay, and it's like you can see what part of the body. It's not disputable. This is what, and it works better. It's quicker. It's more effective. It was apparently that the Premier League were offered that technology, wanted to stick with the model they've got currently, and it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work in its current format. So for me, I would remove it in the sense that we're getting as many errors now, if not more errors now, than we had before it was introduced. And I think referees feel that they don't have to make the decision. The big decisions don't get made. They go, that might have been a penalty, but I'll wait because VAR will give it. It's denied, I don't have to do it, I'm not the bad guy, and all this sort of stuff. And it almost feels like the decision aspect's being taken out. And speaking as a Premier League fan, when you're in the ground,
you ain't got a clue.
You don't know what's going on, right? We've got the private boxes on the left hand side where I sit, and we're sort of doing this, looking into the box, seeing if we can see that it's on Sky Sports or whatever it is, or because they get to see the replay and they don't show the replay on the ground. It just says VAR check-in, and it could be 5 minutes, 6-7 minutes, and you're like, just slows down the game, slows down the pace. And if it was being used correctly and we were eradicating a lot of mistakes from officials, then that's one thing. But I think it's creating more problems than it's solving.
I think you can use VAR for non-subjective decisions. So obviously goal line technology works perfectly because it's in or out. I think if you get to the point of semi-automated offsides, where you can just make the decision and the linesman has it in his ear, I think that would work. I think everything else would get rid. Would you agree with VAR going, or would you have something else to put in?
I'll put something else in, and it probably lends into the VAR chat. I'm an advocate of VAR. It's just how it's used. I agree that it's used better in Europe. It's used better in international competitions, and that's mainly down to the model. Obviously, Premier League, I read the same thing. They turned their back on that. They wanted to do it their own way, and it's shafting themselves basically. But I'll throw into room 1-on-1 the fact that people use screenshots and slow motion replays to judge challenges and tackles. It's like, it's not the sensible way of assessing whether or not a red card should be given. It's the same in VAR. You'll see them on the screen, they'll slow down a tackle, and it's like, let's not slow it down. Like, it was the Calvert-Lewin one in the FA Cup against Crystal Palace, Everton Crystal Palace. They slowed it down. It's like, it makes it look 10 times worse slowed down, because
when the ref runs over and he just sees a still image of a player's foot.
Exactly. And it's like, you're not getting the context of the situation, you're not getting the context of the pace of the situation, and therefore how can you correctly make a decision? And likewise, how can you correctly defend or advocate for a decision on social media, for example, if you are just putting out a screenshot? I just don't think it's a good use of time.
But that's a fan perspective, and the problem is sometimes with social media is that they'll pick out the clip or the still that supports their point more, and then it becomes this thing. And I look back at the Bournemouth game when, Willy Bolly got sent off, and I've got no idea how it could possibly have been a sending off, but because the referee gave it, VAR is a bit on the back foot. Well, we can't really overturn the ref because the refs gave it. We don't have enough evidence to support that it's definitely not. So it is, which isn't the way that it can be used, and you can't look at it that way. Because if the referee didn't make the decision, would VAR have sent him off? I don't think they would, and that's the problem. It's not black and white as it needs to be. And
I also think it's changing people's opinions of the game. When you're even watching an EFL game, you'd be like, "Oh, was that a red in the Premier League? Oh, would that have been in the Premier League?" And I think it's just warping people's perspective almost. I'd get rid of it for subjective decisions. But that's my point of view. Anyway, we can't have a Forest fan and a Derby fan together without talking about Derby County in League One. Currently fourth, 3 points off the top two. Justin, do they get promoted this season?
I've watched enough of Derby County to know that at some point they're going to screw things up. February is always a month that the season implodes. Frank Lampard and Gary Rowett have both called out those periods of times where they've said the fan anticipation of it going wrong is it does impact the players. So everyone's aware of it. But look, we've got a big budget. We've got a good enough squad to push for the top two. I mean, the New Year's Day defeat to Peterborough was a tough one to take. There was no control in that game, no game management, and that's a big issue under Paul Warne. Has been a big issue under Paul Warne. But like I said, we've got the quality to do it. And again, we haven't signed anyone as of yet, as of recording, which is a frustration because we need players, and we're being told that there's one or two on the pipeline and still not coming through. I think I'm just moaning about Paul Warne, to be honest with you, because he promises a lot and under-delivers. But for me, I think we can win promotion, but it'd be very Derby to not do it, for example.
Do you want to see Derby get promoted? Is that an absolute baffling question? Do you miss the rivalry? Do you want them back, or do you want them to rot in League One for the rest of eternity?
Look, I do miss the games, right? Of course I miss the games. Like getting off the train at Derby Station, walking to Pride Park, I do miss it. And the big home nights against them. They're not beat us in so long either, and so we had those last couple of games that were, they were nice for us. But look, I think it's hard. I mean, I'm trying to word it in the way that doesn't pain me to say it. I do think Derby at some point must get it right. I mean, do have the players, and I don't think Paul Warne's a bad manager. like you say, maybe overpromise, underdeliver. But I don't think he's a bad manager necessarily, and I think that Derby have the squad to go up, and I'm not sure anyone wants to go up in League One because Portsmouth lost 3-0 against Leyton Orient the other day. So it's almost like they're fighting to not get promoted at this point in time. You're losing games that you go, you sort of, have you lost that? Like, it's a weird one, but the Fleetwood result was a big result, especially from how they played that day, and there was a few scares. It was a Sky Sports game, so we watched that, and it's, you know, it just has to go right for them at some point. And it hurts me to that Derby they are a big club. They are far. I mean, how do you define a big club? Don't get me wrong, and they are teams are where they deserve to be. But I just feel like Derby will eventually get it right. Might be this season. The last thing you want is the playoffs, I assume. But you know, I think that if you can get a run going, you can string a few performances together, which teams at the top of League One are struggling to do at the minute. If you are able to do that, then I think you will get promoted. And I think that as a Forest fan, as long as we stay in the Premier League and you're still in the Championship, I think just kind of go.
Just below, that's all you need, just the bottom of your foot sort of thing. That's all it is.
It's not too bad.
So maybe a few points deducted for Forest, and Derby get a few results together. We could be seeing this clash in the Championship next year.
That would be tasty. That would be very good, actually. You know, FFP Derby and all that.
The FFP Derby, the renamed FFP Derby. Right, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thanks very much for joining me, Justin and Adam, and we'll see you next time on the Sportsman Untitled.